This program has been paid for by the sponsor and does not reflect the views of PCN.
Good afternoon, and welcome to PHRC Speaks, Fair Housing Forward. I am your host, Brittany Mellinger, and I serve as the Fair Housing Training and Outreach Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. In this show, we explore all things housing with the experts, advocates, and community leaders working to expand access to housing. Today, we'll be discussing PHRC's enforcement efforts in the western region of Pennsylvania. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show my colleague, Dr. LaDawn Robinson. Dr. LaDawn Robinson serves as the Regional Director for the Pittsburgh region. The Pittsburgh Regional Office serves 23 counties in the Commonwealth. Dr. Robinson's role is to manage the daily operations of the office, direct the investigative work of the staff, as well as to conduct outreach and training in the communities in which the office serves. Additionally, this role allows Dr. Robinson to continue her passion for equal employment opportunity in the workplace, specifically the fair treatment that employees' rights are not being violated, but are being respected. Prior to the role of Regional Director, Dr. Robinson devoted 20-plus years in the field of human resources, where she served in multiple management roles and led multiple HR functions, such as equal opportunity, affirmative action, talent acquisition, and employee relations. Additionally, Dr. Robinson is a member of an array of committees, councils, and boards that advocate for social justice, equity justice, and diversity, accessibility, and inclusion. She holds a doctorate degree in executive leadership from the University of Charleston, a Master of Science degree in professional leadership from Carlow University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from West Virginia University. Welcome, Director Robinson, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, Brittany. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here today.
Yeah. So we learned a little bit about your story in your bio, but we all have a story on how we got to our work and our vocation. Can you share a little bit about your journey to your current work?
Yes, absolutely. So my journey to the PA Human Relations Commission really began in human resources, specifically in the areas of employment compliance, which basically means to ensure that companies and organizations are familiar with the federal laws under the U.S. Department of Labor, and also to ensure that HR compliance measures are aligned with those labor laws. And that work pretty much shaped my love for ensuring that an individual was being treated fairly and that they were not being discriminated against regardless of their protected class.
Great. So you're the Regional Director in our Pittsburgh Regional Office. Can you tell our viewers what area of the state that covers?
Oh, absolutely. So I have been the Regional Director for the Pittsburgh Regional Office for a little over a year. And our office covers southwestern Pennsylvania, and that coverage is anywhere between 23 to 26 counties at any given time. And those counties go as far as Erie County, as far north as Greene County, as far south as Greene County. And from east to west, it would be Blair County to Beaver County. So we cover a lot of the state.
Yeah, that's a big portion of the state.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So there may be some folks watching today that might not be familiar with the work of the PHRC. Could you tell us a little bit about the day-to-day work in the regional office?
Good question. The day-to-day work of the regional office is quite complex. And the PHRC initial role is to be the state's civil rights agency to ensure that everyone in Pennsylvania have the right to live, to be educated, and to work without being discriminated against. And at any given time, the office could have anywhere from 22 to 23 people in that office. And it's quite complex because the office is divided up into several teams. And one team is the intake team. And that intake team is led by an intake supervisor. And that team's role is to take in potential complaints and to determine if that complaint is indeed a discriminating complaint, meaning that that complaint or the harm, the alleged harm that happened to the individual happened timely, which basically means within 180 days, that an individual is a member of a protected class, that individual believed that their rights were violated and that those rights that were violated actually happened in the state of Pennsylvania. Some other teams that's part of this big complex day-to-day operations is there's a compliance team and there is a housing team, and basically these are our investigators. And both teams are supervised by their respective compliance or housing investigators. And these investigators basically are neutral. Therefore, they have a pretty much pragmatic process that they go through to ensure that the investigations are done promptly, there are quality investigations, and that the investigations are moving toward where the evidence directs. And doing so, ending up at either a cause, a probable cause, or no probable cause. We also have a legal team that's on site. That's very, very unique for a commission to have a legal team. And that legal team provides us their guidance or resources to assist with quality and effective investigations. And we recently acquired what we called a civil rights outreach coordinator, which is, we call him CROC. And that person is part of the Pittsburgh regional office. And that person really assists with the outreach for the Pittsburgh regional office. So the day-to-day operations of that is the regional director is managing all of those moving pieces to ensure that we are giving voice to folks in the Commonwealth, specifically Southwestern PA, that feel that they have been discriminated against due to their protected class. It's great work. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I can tell. And you're right. It's a lot of moving parts and a lot of teams that are working together to accomplish the work at the PHRC. Yeah. So you mentioned community outreach and the Civil Rights Outreach Coordinator. Where might community members see PHRC staff sharing information in the community?
Oh, great question. And this this CROC addition to the PHRC Pittsburgh family is so helpful to us because we're pretty much anywhere where folks want us to attend. But you would definitely see us in community events such as Juneteenth community events that happen annually, the Pride events. We typically go to No Hate in Our State programs, which is part of the larger commission, the beloved community tours that stopping in every county of Pennsylvania, which is a large portion is in the southwestern regions in our counties. But we also attend annual disability summits. So I ask people if you would like the Pittsburgh Regional Office to attend any community events, just reach out to the regional office, request our attendance, and we will be there.
That's phenomenal. So I want to focus in on housing concerns directly. Could you share a little bit about some issues that you're seeing in housing complaints in your region?
Yeah, so at the Pittsburgh Regional Office, most of the housing complaints that we do receive has to do with accommodations or modifications due to a disability. Modification, meaning modifying something about the facility to allow a renter to be able to enjoy their housing, or an accommodation we call and around like a employee, what we call them, emotional support animals. You know, that seems to be the two main areas for us when it comes to housing investigations. And typically it's around the renter or the landlord not having a really solid understanding that there is a process that's in place that is highly recommended that when a renter is in need of a modification or an accommodation, that renter needs to clearly communicate that to the landlord unless it's an obvious type of need. A lot of the landlords believe that they're not understanding there's a process in place, or they don't follow the process to a level where a decision or an accommodation is deemed reasonable. They automatically assume that it's a hardship for them. So a lot of times it's about educating both parties in those type of housing cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So your region covers a pretty wide range of communities, anywhere from larger cities like Pittsburgh and Erie to a lot of smaller, more rural communities. What can you tell us about how housing needs and discrimination in housing might look different from community to community?
That's a great question, and I thought about that question quite deeply. And as far as urban communities, research has shown, and through some of the cases that's come through the office, that it's more about affordable housing in urban communities. When we move to rural or the suburbs, another concern is more about how many people are kind of living in one home, at times, and meaning that we see like overcrowding can be a concern, especially more in the suburbs, which is kind of right outside of the city, where some of the urban families may have transitioned to that area, but maybe perhaps the cost of the housing is a little bit more. So we are seeing folks that are kind of being overcrowded and more than one adult or one person per bedroom, excluding, a couple. And so then that's when we begin to see where the discrimination around familial status comes into place, where folks believe that they're unfairly being discriminated against having children or having too many in a household, or even where they're renting and there are school zones guidances that is in place to who's living in that rental unit, which that's something that was very new to me that I never experienced and knew that it existed, and was educational for me as well.
Yeah, that connection between those occupancy standards and families with children, it definitely can impact housing opportunities for folks. And that kind of leads me into our next question. So I know you're a long-term resident of the city of Pittsburgh. You were talking a little bit about changing demographics in the region. Can you talk a little bit about how that's impacted housing opportunities in the area?
Yes, absolutely. So the changing demographics for me, and I've been living in the city of Pittsburgh for several years, a few decades actually. And I've always, more often than not, worked in the city of Pittsburgh. And what was very noticeable was in 2020, of course, there was the pandemic, of COVID-19, and folks were working remotely pretty much 100% of the time. When we slowly transitioned back to working in the office, even at a hybrid model, the initial return was quite noticeable that we had an increase in homelessness, unhoused, typically around the veterans with a disability, specifically a mental health disability. That basically when we left downtown, folks that were looking, created tents and camps and in those places. And it really put a long time issue, honestly, in a much needed light, because, another human being was right there when you were walking down the sidewalk, which was probably 3 to 4 years ago, just no one was living on that sidewalk. And then when you returned to the office, there was someone literally living in the doorway of buildings. And so that brought on a lot of conversations, needed conversation discussions that's ongoing to this day on how we, of course, treat people with dignity and respect, ensuring that we are giving folks what is needed to assist them and finding good quality housing for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. There were a lot of changes with COVID that really exposed a lot of underlying things that have been happening for a long time. We also saw that with eviction rates and things like that.
Yes, and a lot of good organizations either stepped up or were created. We had a meeting in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh regional office, one of our public commission meetings that allows the public to come in and speak to various concerns. And we specifically focused on veterans being homeless or unhoused, and had 3 good organizations, Soldier On, an organization called Amen that focuses on more specifically African-American men and input in the community, but they have a veterans initiative as well. Those 2 organizations have actually come together along with a landlord, a company called EX Properties, that is assisting veterans that are in need of housing, giving them temporary housing in addition to giving them or teaching them skills on how to find a job, how to life skills, and also how to retain employment. So there was something very positive and powerful that came from that public commission meeting.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great to hear that there are organizations that are doing this really important work.
Yes.
So I know you come to PHRC with really extensive experience in employment and HR and higher education, but you're a little bit newer to some of the housing work. Is there anything that surprised you about the housing cases that PHRC handles?
Well, I'm very surprised. That's a great question, Brittany. I was very surprised to learn that landlords did not understand that under the ADA, you needed to accommodate their tenants, their renters. And I touched base on this a little bit earlier, how landlords are not aware of the interactive process. It's a process that is not required, but is very much encouraged, because it's basically a conversation between 2 individuals in order to find what best accommodation is needed from that individual so they can live in their unit. And I was just very surprised that so many landlords either never heard of it, they thought they were doing the interactive process and they were not, and how so many landlords require to be educated on that process. That it's really beneficial for them. It's a very simple process and would save them so much time and dollars at the end.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, since that's something that I see as well. Even if a housing provider can't accommodate a specific request, there's often other things that can be considered in order to make that housing livable and usable for that individual, to enable them to live out in the community.
Absolutely. And there's the flip side of that as well, is that it's also educating the renter or the tenants, because as you alluded to, that the initial request for a modification and accommodation, it may not be approved, because the key word is reasonable modification and reasonable accommodation. And again, the first initial request may not be reasonable for whatever reason. And a lot of times you see the process just stalls right there. The landlord's like, that's not reasonable. I'm not going to do this, without any supporting evidence of reason why it's not. It's a hardship, and not knowing that there's another step there. There's another step of finding something that is an alternative, because it's about meeting the need of that tenant or that renter, and that's when other information is required. The treating healthcare provider, and that's where our investigators start gathering more information, getting approval from the complainant of authorization to sometimes reach out to that treating healthcare provider to get that information that we need. So
yeah, if you could just take that extra step.
that extra step.
Yes, to get to that win-win situation where the landlord has a stable tenant and then the tenant has stable housing, which can work for everyone.
And especially around modifications, and often a modification at times, it could be something like a ramp or a railing. And I've always, in prior jobs, when I would present on the interactive process, that it's going to be helpful for everyone. If there's a ramp that's needed to be put in place because it was a request for someone that needed that type of mobile accessibility, at any given time, I guarantee that there's going to be folks without needing a physical accommodation is going to be using that ramp.
Yes.
Or using that railing. So that's where it gets into where people just need to have a good conversation and understanding this is a bigger picture than someone with a disability looking for a handout. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So I know prior to joining PHRC as regional director, you were actually a member of the Penn Hills Advisory Council to the PHRC. Could you share a little bit about the work of advisory councils and how they help PHRC do outreach in the community?
Sure, absolutely. The advisory council is extremely important for any regional office because as for Pittsburgh, we have anywhere from 23 to 26 counties in our region, and we can't be everywhere. We need someone with the pulse on the different counties and communities in those counties. So the advisory council is the bridge between the community member and the Pittsburgh regional office. So the council lets us know if there are concerns from community members. They are also educating community members on, how to file a complaint. These advisory councils also reach out to us to say, hey, these events are going on. Will you work an event with us? There's several events. A council member can go to event A and can someone else go to event B. So we're constantly working together to serve all of those counties and southwestern PA. And I believe we have about, three advisory councils, Penn Hills Advisory Council, Beaver, Ohio, Indiana, and we're recruiting for, I think, Allegheny County and Cambria County, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's even further ones for our viewers, even in the eastern part or the central part of Pennsylvania. There's also additional councils in other areas as well. But those are the ones in the western part of the region.
I enjoyed my time on the Penn Hills Advisory Council. It was about 2 years. It was the first one in southwestern PA under the Pittsburgh Regional Office. And they're still doing great work out there. So
yeah, absolutely. So is there anything that you want our viewers to know about the process of filing a complaint?
If you feel like that you have been discriminated against, if you feel that your rights have been violated, reach out to us, email us, call us. We take walk-ins as well. And our clerk and our intake investigators will, sit down with you, ask you a couple questions, to find out, if you meeting our jurisdiction. Again, as I mentioned earlier, is it timely that the alleged harm happened within 180 days? Did it happen in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? Are you part of a protected class? And why do you feel you were discriminated against or treated unfairly because of that protected class? So I know people often hear, see something, say something, kind of the same application. If you feel something happen, then say something by reaching out to us to file a potential claim.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're nearing the end of our time together this afternoon.
But quick.
I know. It goes really quick. But I wanted to ask you, I know this must be incredibly difficult work day in and day out. Could you share with our viewers what keeps you going in the face of challenges?
Oh, great question. It is difficult work. And at times you feel like you have the entire, Commonwealth on your shoulders, because you hear people, these are human beings that reach out. They're not just case numbers. Okay. They reach out and they truly feel that they have been, mistreated and treated unfairly. And a lot of times they just don't know what to do. And they don't have, they feel that they don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And, the regional office, and definitely the investigators, supervisors, Crocs, the legal team, myself, we keep pushing because we're doing good work. And it's work that's needed. It's work that we're all passionate about. And yes, we do. We hit investigation fatigue, but we are a good team, and we know that the work matters. And we know that there's someone waiting that's usually feeling alone, feeling very isolated, waiting on us to do a good investigation, which we will do, and to get them a finding, as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Director Robinson, for all of the important work that you and your team are doing. And thank you also for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here this afternoon.
Oh, thank you so much, Brittany. It was a pleasure talking with you, pleasure sharing, the knowledge that I have. And I, again, just feel I need to reiterate that if anyone, that hears this, if you feel like you've been discriminated against, reach out to the PHRC, and we will be your voice for you. But again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would also like to thank our viewers for spending their afternoon learning with us. If you believe that you've experienced housing discrimination or would like to learn more about the housing protections in Pennsylvania, give us a call at PHRC's Fair Housing Line, which is 855-866-5718. You can also find us at our website, which is on the screen, www.pa.gov/en/agencies/PHRC. You can also keep up with our work on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And remember, our communities are stronger when everyone has a place to call home. We'll see you next time.
This program has been paid for by the sponsor and does not reflect the views of PCN.